This is day number 1 of our EOC practice, Monday, April the 29th. We'll start out with number 1. It says, what kind of a number is 9 plus pi? 9 plus pi, this number pi here is what's known as an irrational number. All you need to know about the difference between rational and irrational numbers is rational numbers, they stop. And what I mean by stop, um, the number 5 stops. The number 5.32 stops. The number 1/2 stops because that's the same thing as 0.5. It doesn't keep on going. If you look at the number pi, it's 3.1415. It keeps on going and going and going and going after 3.14. Most of us just associate pi with 3.14 or the number 22/7. But it keeps on going. There are other irrational numbers. Um, like the square root of 2 is one we use a lot, the square root of 2. There's no number that when you multiply by itself gives you the number 2. It's 1 point something, and it's a great big long number that never ends because it keeps getting closer and closer to 2, but it doesn't quite get you to 2. So it's an irrational number. It's not a whole number because 3.14, as you think about it, is going to give you 12 point something. It doesn't stop, so it's not rational. So the two choices were between odd and irrational. It may very well be close to an odd number, so that's a little bit tricky, but it is definitely an irrational number. Number 1, D, definitely an irrational number. What you want to do while you're taking the test is you always want to try to eliminate answers first and then choose from the best answers that are there, ones that are left. That way, just in case you're not 100% sure of an answer, you can at least give yourself a 50-50 shot at it. This is something that we did very recently, radical numbers. Remember, had you been adding 3x plus 9x, you'd have gotten the number 12x. Radical numbers act the exact same way. If you have 3 times the square root of 5 plus 9 times the square root of 5, you leave the square root of 5 when you're adding them. You leave it just like you left the x. You don't make that x squared. And you simply add 3 plus 9 and you get 12 times the square root of 5. A. Number 3 says find the midpoint. Now there's a formula for midpoint. But all it is it's averaging your x's and it's averaging your y's. So it's x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. Notice we just added the two x's up and divided by 2. The other one is y sub 1 plus y sub 2. Again, adding them up and dividing by 2. If you can't remember that, just remember to average the numbers out. So if you take the x terms, negative 3 and 6, when you add negative 3 plus 6 and divide by 2, you get the number 3 over 2. And do the same thing, but now with your y terms, negative 2 and negative 4. So negative, and I wrote the wrong one first, negative 2 plus negative 4. Remember, plus and negative just means minus divided by 2. So negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6 divided by 2, which simplifies to negative 3. So you have 3 over 2 and negative 3. That is your midpoint. Notice none of them say 3 over 2. There are no fractions up there. You have to know at this point that 3 over 2, you can divide 3 by the number 2 and you get 1, and there's 1/2 left over. You have to know that that means the same thing. 1.5 is the same thing as 1.5. So 1.5 for your x and negative 3 for your y. X comma y, A. Number 4 says Andrea has 10 more jelly beans than Chelsea, but she has half as much as Rebecca. And then it says model Rebecca's jelly beans. Okay, so what we have, you need to read into this and see what it says. It says she has 10 more than Chelsea. So A equals 10 more than means 10 plus more than Chelsea. So A equals 10 plus C. But then it says Andrea has half as much as Rebecca. So A equals half as much as Rebecca. So half times Rebecca. Then it wants you to model Rebecca's jelly beans. So you want to say R equals something. So what we could do, if we want to isolate, just looking at this equation here, A equals 1/2 R, if we want to isolate or we want to get it to say R equals R by itself, that says 1/2 times r. Undo that by dividing by 1/2. We know how to do that. If you divide by 1/2, it'll cancel it out. Divide the other side by 1/2, or what you have is a times, a divided by 1/2. I know it looks goofy to write it that way, but let's leave it like that for a second. A divided by 1/2 equals r. Remember, when you're dividing fractions, to divide a fraction is the same thing as to multiply by its reciprocal. Remember, all that's a fancy word that just means to flip it. So multiply it instead of by 1/2, multiply it by its reciprocal and flip it. So a, instead of divided by 1/2, a times 2 equals r. Now that gives us r by itself, but we don't know how many values that we have there. So what you need to do is you need to go back and you need to plug in. You have a's value being 10 plus c. That's what it says. A equals 10 plus c. So in place of a, plug in 10 plus c. I'm going to reorder this just to where it'll shape up a little bit for us. But now we have 2 times 10 plus c, because that's a. And all I did again was I changed the order of 2 and a to put the reciprocal first. So 2 times 10 plus c equals, so we'll just finish this one right here, equals r. And then we can clearly see we distribute 2 to both of them. 2 times 10 is 20. And 2 times c is plus 2c equals r. So if we look at this, the one that looks the closest to that, and we have to do a little reordering. Remember, you can reorder addition 2c plus 20 instead of 20 plus 2c. But notice a says r equals 2c plus 20. And again, all we did was substitution. We've done plenty substitution. We refer to it a lot in this class as plugging things in. We've plugged plenty in since the first day in here. Number 5 says, what's the best measure to use for the length of a piece of chalk? They give you 4 options, and they're all length measurements: millimeter, centimeter, meter, and kilometer. Kilometer, everybody. Think of 5Ks, 10Ks. That's how long distances people run. So this is the longest measurement right here, kilometers. A meter, you want to think of a yardstick. Remember, a football field is 100 yards. It's comparable to 100 meters. So let's think of a yardstick with this one. So most people don't have any issues eliminating C and D right away. So got to choose between A and B. Is it a millimeter or is it a centimeter? We had a couple things to think about when we're talking about millimeters and centimeters. Remember, the thing we used to say a millimeter, that was as thick as a dime. Remember the thickness of a dime, the thickness of it. That means you're looking at it from the side. And a centimeter was the tip of your finger. So do you want to measure? So the question is, do you want to measure a piece of chalk with the length of or the thickness of a dime, or the width of the tip of your finger? And this one is the tip of your finger is the best one. Number 6 says rewrite it in slope-intercept form. It's in standard form already. AX plus BY equals C. X minus 5Y equals 5. You want to make it say Y equals out by itself at the very end of the problem. Y equals MX plus B. In order to do that, we got to undo addition and subtraction first. Remember, you normally work, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, but when you're undoing something, you work them backwards. So you want to work from addition and subtraction all the way up this way. So any kind of, we have plus or positive x right there, you undo that by subtracting x. If you do it on the left, subtract x on the right. That'll cancel out, leave you with negative 5y on the right side of the equation. But then you can't take x away from 5 because one of them's a variable term, one's not. So make it say mx first. So negative x, positive 5, then plus b. Not quite done, though, because we got to get y by itself. That says negative 5 times y. Undo times or undo multiply by divide. Since we want to keep y, divide by negative 5. You divide the left by negative 5, divide everything on the right by negative 5. These will cancel out and leave you with just y. That's what you were looking for. This says negative 1x over negative 5. So negative 1 divided by negative 5 is a positive. Negative divided by negative is a positive 1/5 x. And positive 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. Y equals 1/5 x minus 1. The one that works with that one is B. Number 7 says Asia makes $12 an hour plus $20 for every item she sells. She works 40 hours a week, and she wrote a function. What would the independent variable be? Well, the amount of money that Asia would make, y would equal 40 times 12, because that's how much money she makes, plus 20 times x. And you may be able to write that in a slightly different order. But all this is saying, this is the amount of hours she makes. This is her rate, and rate just means how much is your hourly rate. And this is the amount of items sold, the number of items. This one right here is the amount of money she makes per item, money per item. So y equals 40 times 12 plus 20 times x. Then you have to choose, what is the independent variable? We understand what the word independent means in other aspects, maybe not when you're thinking about math though. Independent means it's going to stand on its own. Think of things standing on their own, not being dependent on something else. So you're looking for the variable that is not dependent on something else. Now, if you looking at Asia, Asia's not a variable in this equation at all. So we can take Asia away. Neither is 40 hours a week. Notice there's no variable term here. That's not a variable term. So it's between the number of items she sells, that is a variable term, and the amount of money she makes. That's your other variable term, y. So you have y and you have x. So you have to choose which one is not dependent on other things happening. Notice, in order to get y by itself, y equals 40 has to multiply by 12 and 20 has to multiply by an unknown number x. Whereas that unknown number x is not going to depend on any of that other stuff happening. So the number of items she sells will be her independent variable. The amount of money she makes is going to depend on how many numbers of items she sells. So this is the only one that's independent out of all of them. Just think between independent and dependent. Does it need something else to get the value? Y needs to know what x is. X doesn't need to know what y is. Number 8, you had to choose the best graph for y is greater than -1. Then we had a few sketches of graphs. Greater than -1, if this is your x-axis here, remember this is your y-axis. So you want to show everything above the y-axis, or everything on the y-axis, and everything's going to be above it since it says greater than. Now that says greater than, not or equal to. So automatically we can cancel this one out because it's a solid line. This one down here, D, says this is your x-axis. So this value of x is 1, this value of x is 1. All of these value of x are 1, but it doesn't tell you anything about y's value. So you can take that one out. So we got to choose between A and C. It says y is greater than -1. If this is your x-axis and this is your x-axis, the one that's below it would be where -1 is. Positive would be the one above it. A is your best bet for that one. Number 9 says the perimeter of a triangle is 32 feet. The second side is twice as long as the first. Third side is 2 feet longer than the second. What are the lengths of the 3 sides? Perimeter equals, what I'm going to do is we'll call, instead of the second side, we're going to call that side B. Instead of the first side, we'll call that side A. And instead of the third side, it says instead of the third side, we'll call that C. So instead of using 1, 2, and 3, we'll use A, B, and C. It'll help us out. So it says the second side, perimeter equals A plus B plus C in this case, because it's the distance around the triangle. So if you're looking at a triangle that looks like this, A, B, and C, you're just talking about the distance around it, A, B, and C. It says the second side is twice as long as the first. So if we say B equals 2 times A, again, because we called B the second side, A the first side. The second statement said the third side is 2 feet longer. It says the third side is 2 feet longer than the second side. So the third side, C, equals 2 plus, or 2 feet plus, the second side, B. So you have two equations, B equals 2 times A and C equals 2 plus B to go along with your perimeter, A plus B plus C. So if we just plug in the values that we know, in place of P, we know that it says it's 32 feet long. So 32 equals, in place of A, or in order, I should say, to get A by itself, we could take this equation, B equals 2 times A, if you look at it this way, 2 times A, and you can simplify for A. That says 2 times something, divide by 2. If you do that, do the same thing to this side. This will cancel, and it'll give you what A is by itself. A equals B divided by 2. So in place of A, I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but in place of A, we'll plug in this value here, B divided by 2. Plus, our next one is just B. And then our last one, in order to get C by itself, we actually have it already, 2 plus B. In order to get B by itself, in this case, get rid of this plus 2 by subtracting it. So C minus 2. So B's value all by itself is C minus 2. So again, in place of our C value, we'll plug in place of C, I'm sorry, I actually did that backwards. We already had it good. We already have 2 plus B, everybody. I'm not sure why I did that. 2 plus B. We'll plug in place of C, we'll plug in 2 plus B. So in place of C plus 2 plus B, and I know I'm all over the place. So I'm going to bring this down and make it a little bit clearer for us. So 32, that's our perimeter, equals A's value is B divided by 2, plus B's value plus C's value, 2 plus B. And again, all we did right here was plug in or substitute in values for A, B, and C. But we went from having 3 variables, A, B, and C, to now we only have B. So if we want to cancel out, this says right here, B divided by 2. If we want to cancel out divide by 2 for everything, multiply by 2. That'll cancel this out and just leave you with B. But you can't just multiply one thing by 2. You got to multiply every term in the equation by 2. So 32 times 2 is 64 equals B plus 2B plus 4, because 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times B is plus 2 more B. Again, I know we're going all over the place. We'll come back. We'll rope it all in right here. Put your like terms together. B plus 2B plus 2 more B. So B and 2B is 3B plus 2 more B is 5B plus 4 equals 64. Undo your operations. Undo addition by subtracting. Do it on that side. Do it on this side. Leaves you with 60 equals 5B. And then get rid of multiply by 5 by dividing by 5. B equals 12. So you have B's value, or you have the second one's length as B equals 12. So we know that B equals 12. When you're looking at your option choices, it says that the last one says that the third side was 2 feet longer than the second side. So if you look at the second and the third one, those are 5 apart. You can immediately eliminate that one. The rest of them were 2 feet longer. So if you look at the second side, we know that B's value is 12. So all you need to do is you need to look at your 3 second side values. The only one that's 12 is this one here, B. Then number 10 says, which measurement is the most precise? Remember, precision is the smallest unit being measured. They're all inches, so you can't look to the measurement unit. All you have to look to the smallest number. Remember, your smallest number when you're talking about fractions is the one that is the largest number. So this is your smallest one too. This is your largest one there. That is the most precise one, because when you're talking about fractions, the one that has the largest number at the bottom is your most precise unit measurement.